Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I know this is going to be a great conversation with my guest today, Andrea Rosario, because if it's been any indication from our pre-recording chit chat, we're going to have so much to share with you guys. Andrea, thank you so much for being here today. Please introduce yourself and tell the listeners more about you, what you do in the world, and why you're so passionate about helping others.
Thank you, Jory. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So I am a functional medicine doctor and a functional neurologist. And basically, I specialize in helping women who are burnt out escape fight or flight and reset their body chemistry for calm. And I'm really passionate.
Like we all need that right now, right?
We do. Yes, it is a crazy world we live in. I'm passionate about it because I grew up, actually, my mom was a single mom and she burnt out really badly from a really stressful, toxic work environment and went from like a vibrant, engaged, present mom to being bedbound. She wouldn't get out of bed for days. And she ended up, it was in the 80s before fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue had labels. It was all in your head, according to the doctors. And so she ended up just kind of not able to take care of my brother and I very much. And so I jumped into, at that time, thinking about how do I want to help people like my mom? Like someone needs to help her. They're just throwing medications at her. Like nobody's,
it wasn't solving the problem, right?
No,
it was just putting a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah, it's all Band-Aid based, basically. Like, here's what you need to get out of my office. Thank you very much, And it had ripple effects through our whole family. And so it's not really just the burned out person, especially when it's the mom. It affects everyone, their whole ecosystem, everyone around them. So
absolutely. Yeah. So can we start like at the very basis so our listeners have a really good working definition? Can you define functional medicine and what functional neurologist means? Because I'm sure there's many people who can maybe conceptualize what that actually means, but give us a real working definition for what does that mean and what is it you actually do with your patients?
Okay, great. So functional medicine is more well-known than functional neurology is, for sure. There's not that many functional neurologists in the world, but functional medicine is basically a whole approach to health, where in traditional medicine, you've got the gastroenterologist for all your gut issues. You've got the neurologist for your brain issues. You've got the rheumatologist for your joint issues. But the truth is that your body is a whole ecosystem. It talks, all the different systems talk and depend upon each other. And so everyone's just got their little specialties without respecting the fact that they all are like a symphony, And so functional medicine approaches your body that way and understands how all the systems communicate together. And then
I love that visual. Sorry to interrupt, but I love that visual of thinking that your systems in your body are like a symphony.
Yeah. It's
a really beautiful. It is a beautiful, but it's a beautiful image. And I'm very much into visuals. It helps me conceptualize things when I can really visualize it. And so when I hear that, I think, well, no wonder if, one person in the orchestra is off on a key, it's going to affect the entire sound of the music trying to be produced, right?
Exactly. And so functional medicine basically looks at your body as a whole. And then we try to use diet, lifestyle, sometimes nutraceuticals like supplements and stuff to break cycles, the vicious cycles that are happening in your body that you get stuck in, and try to allow some of the noise in your body, like all the symptoms and stuff, to sort of melt away, going for the root cause as opposed to just bleeding,
So if that's what functional medicine does, and what does functional neurology do? And why are there so less of that? Why is that a lesser known, piece of that pie?
Yeah, well, functional neurology, when I became a functional neurologist in probably like 2014, 2015, something like that, I think I was one of maybe 600 or 800 in the country.
Wow.
There wasn't very many at all. It's more popular now, but basically what functional neurology does, where traditional neurology looks at, stroke or tumors, they're kind of looking more at structural stuff. Functional neurology looks at how are your neurons firing? Are they firing too high? Are they firing too low? What about the different lobes of your brain? Are they functioning properly? Are they communicating with each other properly? And then you can give exercises to improve the function wherever it's lacking.
I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really
yeah. So someone comes to you with symptoms of stress, overwhelm, burnout, probably other medical conditions that nothing else has been able to fix, like maybe fibromyalgia or gut issues. I mean, right? I mean, these are the things that people come to you and say, my regular doctor hasn't been able to help. I've been taking this medication and I still feel like shit, right? So what would be your first approach? How would someone, and if someone's listening now, like what would be some of the things they would want to start to get curious about or be aware of to even consider? How could I sit back and even just for my own mindset, consider this whole approach?
Well, a lot of times it really starts with diet. That's a good place to start. And there is not one single diet that is right for everybody, not a single one. And so trying to get rid of any food sensitivities. We're not talking allergies, we're talking sensitivities.
Can you describe the difference there?
Yeah.
I think people over attach to, I have a food allergy versus a food sensitivity. What exactly is that difference?
So a food sensitivity, okay, I have to go into a little bit of a leaky gut conversation, I guess, about
Perfect.
that.
No, I think this is great because this is helpful for me to understand as well. So this is great.
So a food allergy is an actual allergy, like you think of it, like sometimes it's anaphylactic, sometimes like people's throat tingles or their tongue swells up. Those are like allergies. So a food sensitivity happens oftentimes because there's a couple of different reasons, but oftentimes it's that the person has a leaky gut. And what that is there's a thin line of cells on the inside of your intestines that are supposed to be really tightly bound together, and they can break apart and become farther apart. And then the reason why the food sensitivities happen is because, let's just say you've got a piece of banana that you just ate and it hits your gut, your intestinal barrier is leaky, and so a chunk of banana goes through that barrier, and your body is like, your immune system's like, wait a minute, what the heck is this? Like, I know what potassium looks like. I know what magnesium looks like. I know what B vitamins look like, but this is a chunk of mush and I have no idea. So then your immune system puts out a little flag and says, hey, you guys watch out for this banana. And they don't know what it's called. It's not a banana.
Right. Watch out for this pile of mush.
Yes. And so every time you eat a banana, it creates inflammation because your immune system's tagged it as like an invader. And so your immune cells kind of come and just start attacking it all the time and just create systemic inflammation. And that most of the time looks like aches and pains. I mean, joint pain, muscle aches, that type of thing is the most common.
Would that also include something like upset stomach?
It absolutely
after eating certain foods, right? For people who have all of a sudden developed what they're saying is, a sensitivity or an allergy, like all of a sudden at 70 years old, I can no longer eat gluten or I can no longer eat dairy because my stomach is upset for hours and hours and hours. Is that connected to having a leaky gut then? Would be a good way of kind of thinking about it? Or could someone actually develop an allergy at 70 years old?
Well, they could develop an allergy at 70, but leaky gut would be one of the ways that could happen. Another thing that can happen is just some of your digestive juices kind of get dried up sometimes with age. So like your stomach acid, maybe you're not producing a lot of stomach acid, or you're not producing the enzymes, your pancreas is kind of tired out, And so there's different digestive juices that could be the cause. And then in that case too, it could be like a bad bacteria imbalance in their gut, because sometimes if you have bad bacteria overgrowth in your gut and you're eating foods, that bacteria eats the same foods you do as it's going through your system. And then they can produce gases that can give you constipation, diarrhea, bloating, gas, that type of stuff too. So that's another, there's a few different ways that that could become a symptom that a person has, but leaky gut's
interesting.
One of them.
Yeah. So what you're starting to say is we first got to look at diet and to be able to consider how are the foods that we're eating contributing to my overall sense of well-being.
Right. Yeah. And
how do you begin to narrow that down? Is it as simple as just an elimination diet? Is there testing to figure that out? Is it maybe not even the foods, but addressing the potential leaky gut issue?
Yeah, all of the above. So a lot of people, if they're tight on money, they just go straight for the elimination diet. And, kids can have like a 2-3 week elimination diet. Adults need like 4 to 6 weeks before they can start reintroducing foods to get their immune system to calm down. And so we do that quite frequently for people who are a little bit pinching pennies. There is food sensitivity testing that's really, really good from a company called Cyrex Labs. And they basically are pretty expensive, quite honestly, but they're the best that there is. And if you want like
what does expensive mean? Is that thousands of dollars?
About $900 for about 180 foods that they test. And what's cool about them is they test we'll just say peanuts. They'll test peanuts raw. They'll test peanuts like honey roasted. Because when you cook things different ways, like potato raw versus potato boiled versus potato fried, it changes the protein structure of the food. And so
the chemistry of it changes. That would make sense.
Yeah. So they test all of those. So it's really cool because you get a very clear, I can't have my French fries, but I can have my baked potato kind of answer, which
right.
So that's mostly there's supplements and foods that can help seal a gut barrier, but
what did something like the probiotics or prebiotics help with that leaky gut, or is that a different solution?
No, it does help. Actually, lactobacillus and bifidus strains of bacteria help protect that layer of the gut, that thin single cell layer that is in your intestines. So they definitely are something that can contribute to a healthy gut barrier for sure.
Right. So someone has potentially a leaky gut issue. They're having potential digestive issues, but maybe they don't notice that that's the problem. What else may they be presenting as? Because I think that's the part where, many of the people listening might feel maybe they're even making the connection to their diet, but what would people come in as a presenting problem?
Yeah, like I said earlier, aches and pains are a big one, but also like brain fog, memory issues, like, just motivation issues sometimes, just because the inflammation goes in your brain too. And so, a lot of brain issues that's very common.
So how do we differentiate? And this is where I guess if you and I were to team up and working with someone, we could like get it from all angles, right? Of me being the therapist and mindfulness and meditation teacher, and right. So how could someone differentiate from when you see a new patient? Is it just stress for the sake of life is just really stressful and overwhelming right now? Or is there something actually going on in my body that's causing me to have an increased reaction to stress? Do you know what I'm saying? Because there's likely different doors into the same room, as I like to say. So how would you be able to differentiate? Because I think what we're seeing now, and what I want to get to with you is this idea of burnout, right? And taking from what your mom experienced to what right now feels just like a baseline of normal for so many people, because it's really hard to be alive in the year 2021. We thought it was hard in the year 2020. It hasn't gotten necessarily any easier. So we're at this new baseline of stress, which I think people have adapted to, but it's still wreaking all this havoc inside their mind and bodies and relationships and everything else, focus, attention, all of it.
Yeah, well, truthfully, you won't heal your physical symptoms or your physical body if you're in constant fight or flight mode. It all has to be done at the same time. And it's almost never only one thing. It's never just a physical, like it's just a digestive issue. It's just a food sensitivity. And it's never just like a bad relationship or a,
right. You and I know that, but they might not know that.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you kind of have to hit it from as many angles as you can all at once, and trying to get all the contributors to being stuck in fight or flight, survival mode, and try to tackle them all at once, which seems overwhelming, but one little thing at a time can make a big difference.
So let's even start from the baseline of there. When we talk about being in fight or flight, again, you and I know what that means, but let's just define that in how you would describe it so people understand. Maybe they don't have the language to say I'm in fight or flight because that's not what they're used to identifying it as. What would most people identify in their kind of everyday language of what being in fight and flight looks like?
Well, when I have a patient come to me and they say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I'm stressed, I'm anxious. Those are words that are really commonly used where I'm like, uh-oh, what's happening here? And what it ultimately comes down to is you have these, I'm going to simplify it a little bit, but you have this area of your nervous system that is either on one leg, it's fight or flight, that's sympathetic nervous system. On the other leg, it's rest and digest, that's parasympathetic nervous system. So if someone is in like extreme dominance of that fight or flight, like they're constantly living in survival mode, which is many of us, then they tend to not rest and digest well, right? So they don't get all the gastric juices, all the juices for digestion don't really happen that well. They can tend to have constipation or diarrhea. And then they can also, on the rest aspect, they don't get deep restful sleep. So they oftentimes, are crashing in the middle of the day. They're oftentimes waking up and being like, I wish I could sleep for another like 3 hours, because they can't get rejuvenated. They're not getting that deep, healing, restful sleep at all. So.
And, it's so interesting because, I teach this exact same thing, the, sympathetic, parasympathetic, and I'm so used to saying the words, fight or flight, being on constant alert, it's survival mode, right? And the way that I'll describe it to my clients, and I'm sure many of my listeners who have been listening to me from the beginning have probably heard me say it 1,000 times, the design flaw of our brain, as I see it, is, we go into that fight or flight when we have that potential threat to our survival, right? So when we were cavemen, there's the bear in the cave and all of our bodies being produced to run or fight the bear so we can stay alive. The design flaw is our thoughts are so powerful that we could have a thought of, oh, I think that's a bear because I saw a shadow, so I'm interpreting the thought as a threat. And our body still reacts in the same way. So if we're not even noticing our thoughts, let alone the actual threats to our survival, safety, security, comfort, all of those things, which right now in the middle of COVID feel really hard to get to the rest and digest.
Yeah.
In the middle of our, political uprising and climate uprising, like it's hard to even get to that place because the constant thoughts are reactivating the fears, the anxieties. How can I feel safe when I don't know what safe looks like anymore? How can I feel calm when there's always something to worry about?
Yeah, there's a quote that I love. I can't remember who said it, but it's basically when you're in fight or flight, red flags and butterflies all look the same. And it's true because, the more it is our thoughts, it is our stressful environment and climate, but it's also being a woman in your 20s who's basically working their tail off with a job in college and trying to make your way in the world and like stressing, trying to get all that done for years, year after year after year. And like that fight or flight wiring in your brain, it becomes like a really well-traveled trail. Yes. And it's sort of like hard to get out of it. You can, but
and for the things that I will work with people is you might have become so accustomed to this, you don't even realize it's a problem until you notice the symptoms, right? Of either I'm constipated, I can't sleep, I can't focus at my job, I'm always yelling at my kids, I can't connect with my partner. So there's other factors that are going to show up, but because their baseline of stress has become so normalized, They don't even see it as I'm stressed anymore. Or bigger issue, right? It's normalized within their communities. So they're just doing what everyone else is doing, not always seeing the negative side effects of what everyone else is doing because they're only noticing theirs, but then they're in comparison mind to the people around them with the perception that they're handling it easier because it looks like that on Facebook or Instagram.
Exactly.
Right? Because no one's actually posting, I'm sleep deprived and constipated. They're more glorifying the stress of look how busy I am.
Right. Yes.
Which look how important I am. Look how busy I am. That's what stress represents, is I'm so important.
That's right. That's totally true. And especially, I got to tell you, my practice, I've worked probably with 95% of them are women that I work with in practice. I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or I'm not sure how that all happened, but men tend to, in general, like wait until their arm is cut off and bleeding to go to the emergency room versus women are a little more preventative in their health. And so I think that might be it. But across the board, I would say almost all of those women are stuck in fight or flight, almost all of them. And it affects not just like your wake sleep cycle because of the stress hormone cortisol, but it affects like your hunger signaling. It affects your blood sugar regulation. It creates inflammation. It affects your brain. It makes you anxious. It affects your blood pressure. I mean, if you actually look at a person who's got random symptoms that nobody's putting together for them, seemingly random symptoms, a lot of the time it's them being stuck in this wiring of fight or flight mode, and they don't even know it because, we women have to juggle so many balls and rarely self-care the way that we should. And it's an epidemic, quite honestly. It's really sad.
It really is. And I think this begs the next question. Someone who says, okay, Andrea, now, because you've given me the language to put to it, I can actually recognize, yes, I'm in fight or flight. And the truth of the matter is, none of these things that are causing it can I let go of, because that's just my job. Those are my roles, right? And it's the perception of I can't put any of them down because then I'm holding up the whole house, right? I'm holding the sky up above my family or myself and my community or whatever, the responsibility is. And so it's interesting. I've had so many clients lately, ironically, get stuck in the fight and flight and unable to tap into the rest and digest because they literally have no time for self-care. And that just the to-do of self-care becomes just one more thing they can't catch up on, which causes them shame, which causes them frustration, which is now increasing the anxiety and stress of, look, I can't even take care of myself. And so I've been beginning to shift my response with that, because if we can't get to the self-care, then we're never going to be able to get to the rest and digest. But so I really believe, well, let's at least start with self-compassion.
Yes.
Because self-compassion takes no extra time out of your day. Where self-care actually does take time out of your day. So if your perception is you have no extra time, which is not really true, because we make time for what's important, and that's a secondary question, right? But if we could start with the self-compassion to just acknowledge, wow, I'm really overwhelmed right now. Like, this is a lot. Like, that in and of itself is going to help calm the brain down.
Absolutely. I mean, we expect so much of ourselves that we would never expect of our children. Like if we could do a little self-mothering with compassion and like kindness towards what we're experiencing, it would go so far. But what we do is we should all over ourselves. I said should.
Yes, we do.
Yes, because that was not clear.
Yes.
And then we're beating ourselves up. I should be taking better care of myself. I should have done better at this. And that's all stress producing. So you're right. One of the main ways, if you don't feel like you've got a whole heck of a lot of time, is to just be careful the way you talk to yourself and like, be compassionate and nice to yourself the way that you would be your own children.
Yeah. I always say compassion is the opposite of judgment. And as soon as we're in judgment, we're right back into that cycle. Right. And we're in that spiral of the hamster wheel of that, stress and overwhelm where it's seemingly we can't get off of. But you can't change what you're not aware of. So we're both saying the same thing. If you got to be aware that you're even in the hamster wheel to be able to get off of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, two of the tools I really like to use to help people, women in particular, escape fight or flight. These might be buzzwords, so bear with me here, but it's basically rhythm and routine and presence. And when I say presence, that's like kind of annoying. but what I mean by that is we tend to live rethinking things in the past or in the future. And it's hard to practice presence in general. But what I like to do is I like to use nature and the seasons to like change the way I take care of myself from season to season and change the pace at which I go from season to season. And because of just being aware of what's happening in the world around me nature-wise, it creates presence. You don't live in summer if you're living your lifestyle in winter lifestyle, right? You don't live in that perpetual go, go, go summer. And so it's a way of like bringing presence to your existence without being like, darn it, Andrea, you're not supposed to be thinking about tomorrow. You're supposed to be being present. Be present with your children. Like it just naturally happens on a macro level if you start paying attention to that.
I think that's so beautiful. And I'm someone who loves visuals. And so I can actually visualize how that might look different for each season. But could you just give some of your favorite tips of what it actually looks like during autumn and fall? Like, what does it mean to be present in relation to each season? Could you give us like a little quick 4-term seasonal example? Because I think it's, as we're on the cusp of entering into fall, it's a beautiful time to reset.
Yeah. So there are a few things. Fall is my favorite time to start doing this because I always say like healing begins with autumn, because we live in this perpetual summer of go, go, go all the time. And we have to release things in order to heal, because we can't keep you can't keep that pace and expect your body to work like a well-oiled machine. It's just not going to happen. It's impossible. And so I love the idea of just releasing things in the fall. So the trees don't hold on to their leaves because they think they're going to need them, right? The trees release the leaves so that they can go into winter with their core most survivability of the winter, basically.
Right. It sets them up for the best survival.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for helping me on that one. So basically, every fall I sit there and I look at like my friends. I'm like, oh, okay, that one has become very toxic. Maybe I won't confront. I definitely won't, because I'm not a confronter, but I will purposefully start stepping back, right? And releasing my tie to that person, or like habits that aren't serving me, or obligations that aren't serving me. I look at my business every year with the same thing, and I take care of myself different in the fall. Like you start paying attention to your immune system, and you start getting your skin ready for the cold, bristly days where you get all cracked, right? I mean, there's just different things that you can do in the different seasons that can promote your well-being and bring you to presence in general, just by the fact that you're honoring every season and not just the crazy chaos of summer. And
so I love that. So if fall is about releasing, what would you say a great practice is for winter?
Deep rest. Like if you notice, we like to do.
I was thinking like the bears hibernating.
Yeah, exactly. Hibernation, deep rest. I honestly, I don't know how many of my friends have caught on, but I usually will have like one last gathering with my friends, and then I just don't see them very much in the winter at all. I'm like, I'm hibernating with my blanket and my book, and I'm okay.
I've got my hot cocoa and the fire's going, and no one's allowed in my bubble. Oh, that's right. So beautiful right now.
Yes, that's pretty much it. And so, with my kids, we do less obligations in the wintertime. We all learn more intellectual stuff in the wintertime versus in the summer and the spring is more experiential learning. In the winter, it's kind of like, let's hunker down with some biochemistry.
I'm sure they're like, yeah, great, mom. Okay, so what would you say would be some of those tips for spring?
For spring, now, if this is the trick, if you were able to pare back the stuff in the fall and you are able to take a rest, you should have renewed energy in the spring. And you kind of re-emerge with like new ideas, new projects, new excitement.
The word that came to my mind as you were saying that was just creativity.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you've given your body a rest, you know, and when we talk about fight or flight, that's like, if you look at yin yang energy, that's the yang, right? That's the outward. That's the busy. The yin is like the calmness and the inward. And if you're just all yang all year round, you're super imbalanced, your nervous system's imbalanced, your chemistry is imbalanced. You will not have the mojo come spring to do anything, because you're just still like a stretched out rubber band, just like not much give.
Right.
So you haven't given yourself like some time to.
And I could guess what you might say, but now I'm curious. What would you say for summer?
Summer is celebration. Summer is community. Summer is fun and joy, which
the word that came to my mind as I was thinking about it was play. Like just play.
Yes.
Because I think when we're overworked, we discard play.
Yeah, we do. And it's such a trip. I mean, to think about it this way, because in the summer, I say all the time, we live a perpetual summer because it is go, 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 like the pace of summer is. But at the same time, a lot of my patients and my friends and myself, if you ask, what do you do for joy? They have no clue. Do you find that in your clients? Mm-hmm. They've got no idea, and they don't play. So they're in the busyness of summer and all the obligation and like chaos.
The output.
The joy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I love this, Andrea. And I think again, I said I'm a visual person, and I can really connect to like the visual of looking at the earth around me and looking at the seasons and just looking at the trees and the leaves and the blossom, and be able to connect to those biorhythms around that.
Yeah. And that's basically an easy way where you don't have to should yourself about not being present. You just do what nature's doing. Just look to nature, do what nature's doing. And
the other thing I'm thinking is, you know, in summer, part of that play and go, go, go is literally the days are longer. So we are doing more, right? And in the winter, and they get shorter, so we can actually rest more. It's darker longer.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Yes. So I imagine a lot of women listening right now are saying, okay, Joy and Andrea, this all sounds great and lovely, but I just don't have time to slow down. Because I hear this all the time, right? Maybe that works for you, but that's just not going to work for me. I just don't have the time. I know what my response would be, but I'm curious, what would your response be?
Well, if you don't make the time and make the effort, your life is not going to make that a choice for you anymore.
Yeah.
People come to me when they're like deep down the rabbit hole of chronic, complicated illness because they didn't make the time to do it. And sometimes they've had to give up their jobs. Sometimes they are bedridden, like my mother was. Their body is telling them they're doing it, whether they want to or not, you know, and I'd much rather sometimes releasing things is hard. It's not always fun. Sometimes there's grief involved. It's not great sometimes, but on the other side of it, there's so much relief on the other side. And, you know, if they don't do it, their body and their situation or the universe or whatever you want to say will make the choice for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my response to that is when people say like, you know, Joy, I don't have time to be mindful or practice mindfulness, or my response is, you don't have time to be angry or stressed, but that's still showing up. Right. So let's just see if we can shift your relationship to what's arising to be one of more self-compassion, one of more presence and awareness, and tuning into the gratitude, because we know with the fight flight, you know, the more you dwell on the negative, which is how our brain is wired, that negativity bias, we're wired for it. So we're fighting an uphill battle to begin with, right? This is where our wiring isn't within our favor because we're designed, and, you know, and it goes back to that survival mode. And yet we don't always have to be on such high alert.
Yeah.
And so maybe for some people listening, maybe the solution is, okay, I can't turn it off, but can you turn the volume down? Maybe it's, you know, I always talk about the 1% shift, not the 90% shift, let the 1% grow over time. The 90% feels too big, too much change all at once, but I can do something small.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I would usually say if it's looking like there's absolutely nothing you can give up, I just say, okay, inventory time. What is constantly stressful for you that's a part of your routine? And can you delegate it or can you automate it? Like, are your kids doing the chores that they should be doing? Because if you're like at the end of a work day, you're trying to do, you know, dishes and cleaning and dinner and all this kind of stuff, you know, some of that needs to be delegated. Kids could use some responsibility sometimes, and
all the time. Yes.
Yeah. and then there's some things that could be automated. Maybe grocery shopping isn't your favorite thing, so you get your groceries delivered, right? Or there's stuff that you can do. You just have to really look for it and have an open mind as to, you know, what you can.
Absolutely. And I think this has been, I personally feel, and this is by no means, I want to, you know, before I say what I'm going to say, I'm not disparaging the intense amount of suffering and life loss and illness that COVID has brought. I mean, this is an and I think what COVID has provided us is an opportunity, if we so choose to see it as such, to slow down.
Yes.
Right. And, you know, I was really hopeful that people will have taken what COVID offered, which is, you know what, you don't have to rush around to every store anymore. How can you get some help on the things that were causing you stress? Like, you know, I mean, I went to Target, I think one time in 1 year. Amazon was the solution, and that was great. And that was a lot out of my time and actually probably less money overall, right, than wandering the aisles of Target. But, you know, when we had to stop and slow down, we have a choice in how we want to re-engage in our lives. And I think so many people just went right back to the routine that it was pre-COVID without recognizing, wait, you mean I have a choice in how I re-engage? Because if we can recognize we have a choice in our commitments or how busy, and we think we can't make them. I remember years ago when both my daughters, they danced for about 10 plus years. And a couple years ago, we got their new dance schedule, and the studio they were at had like 3 different locations. And for whatever godforsaken reason, the dance studio put both of my daughters in different locations that were the furthest from where I lived, at different locations at the exact same time on the same day. And I remember getting the schedule, and as a mom, I literally shut down. I started to cry, and I'm like, you guys, not working. Like, I am not able to be in 2 places at one time. It does not support our family and our household and our lifestyle for us to be out at dance until 9 o'clock on a Monday night. This is not the structure I'm creating for our home. And I said, this is it. Not we're done dancing. We're done with this studio if this is all that they can provide for us. And I just drew the boundary right then and there. If it's not working for me, it's not working for you guys, right? And I don't think a lot of parents allow themselves the freedom to make that kind of boundary, because they want to do everything for their kids and give them every opportunity, but they're not recognizing if it's costing you your health and your livelihood and your peace of mind and your ability to slow down, is that really helping your kids?
Right. Yeah.
And so I had that breakdown, and they didn't judge it. They're like, okay, I get it. Great. Let's find a studio that meets their needs for the lifestyle that we want to be living. But most parents are going to be like, okay, shit, I've got to be in 2 different places at 2 different times. How am I going to do it? I'm going to make it work at all costs because that's what my kids want. And the good mom is the one who gives my kids everything they want.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they're unhappy or stressed or, you know, every symptom we just already mentioned.
Exactly. And I mean, just as a little side note, they're setting their kids up for the fight or flight wiring by having them go 1,000,000 miles an hour in 500 different commitments too.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah. You know, I think there's such great value in learning how to be bored, and learning what do you do with downtime, and learning how to do nothing without being lazy, right? There's a difference, but unfortunately, our culture and society doesn't support that, which probably gives you more patience as well as mine. It's the good news and the bad news, but we're seeing this epidemic of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'd rather be out of business and have everybody be healthy. I mean,
I 100% agree. I mean, this is our goal. You and I are both here to help people live healthier, happier, more balanced lives. And yet all we're seeing is more burnout, more stress, more overwhelm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything in wrapping up that we haven't been able to cover? Because this has been such a great conversation. I think there's been so many wonderful, like really tangible tips and awarenesses that I think people could walk away with. But is there anything else that we haven't been able to touch upon that you think people would really benefit from hearing?
Yeah, just one thing. I'm big on, I talked about presence and how I use the season for that, for helping people get out of fight or flight mode. But another one is routines and rhythms. And a good place to start, because we can't just all in one day exit fight or flight mode, right? And wiring. But what you can do is before you rest and before you digest, so before meals and before you go to bed, there is a specific cadence of breathing that helps stimulate your parasympathetic rest and digest mode. And so taking like an inhale for the count of 3 and an exhale for the count of 6. So it's like a 1 to 2 breathing cadence. That will stimulate your parasympathetic. So doing that, as well as things like saying grace, saying prayers, gratitude like that. If you can make a before meal little routine and a before bed routine to pull yourself at least for that time out of fight or flight, you might really start to see a shift in those areas of your life and maybe start to feel more rested and such. And there's a bunch of different things you can do, but the routine really does help calm your system because it's safety. It's in your neurology, routine is safety. It's predictability. It's really very valuable for helping you escape.
Andrea, I love that. And it's such an interesting thing when we consider how the state of our mind and body and energy when we're eating. So is what you're saying, if I can make it really clear, if I am really stressed and anxious and overwhelmed as I'm eating, my body is just literally not going to digest it well.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And you may or may not know it at the time. Like you may be someone who doesn't have stomach pains and things like that. But if you don't stimulate that parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system, you don't get your stomach acid, your bile to digest the fats, your pancreatic enzymes to digest your starches. So you're getting chunks of food that are just going through your system and you're going to be nutrient deficient because it's not getting broken down the way that it should. That's going to be a big energy suck. You're not going to feel good if you're like totally depleted of your nutrients. And that's simply because you're sitting there eating in a fight or flight, chaotic, anxious situation. And your nervous system did not shunt its energy and its resources to helping you properly digest your food.
It's so fascinating. And it makes so much sense. And yet, this is definitely going to be something that I add into my work with clients because I've been really good at explaining the rest part, but I don't think I had the clear language to help understand the digest part. So thank you for sharing that. That definitely gave me some new language and new tools to add into the repertoire. But I think it's something people can immediately begin to be aware of and just ask themselves, where am I, right? Energetically, emotionally, physically, mentally, before I sit down and eat this meal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then it all starts to make sense when people are saying, don't stand up and eat, don't work while you're eating, don't watch TV while you're eating. Can you imagine watching the news right now while you're eating dinner? Not good. Just the awareness, you hear all these little tips, but that's actually what is happening in your body and why those tips even exist and work. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about my own life. I'm like, yeah, okay. So I actually really do need to give myself a lunch hour and not eat for the 5 minutes in between my clients. That would probably help a little bit.
If you need a doctor's note for that, Jory, I
think I might. Yeah. I might. You need to have you send me a little, prescription pad I'll put up on my wall in front of me. Andrea said.
Yeah. Perfect.
Andrea, this has been such a wonderful conversation and full of so much really, valuable information, but coming from that holistic approach in a really relatable way. So thank you so much for sharing everything today. How can people find you?
It was absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to your audience here and to talk with you.
Yes, this has been so fun.
It has been. So you can find me on my website, teachthemwell.com. And through there, you have links to all like the social media, my podcast, the various projects that I have. And so that's probably the best one-stop shop to go see if there's
perfect
other information that I can help you with.
That is fantastic. Well, that link to your site will be in the show notes, and anyone who is listening will be sure to have easy access to that. And Andrea, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having this conversation, and I hope all the listeners are taking some really good notes, because there's a lot of things that they can do right now that don't take really any extra time to begin to just start with that awareness. So thanks again.
That's right. All right. You're very welcome. Thank you, Jory, and be well. Take good care, everyone.
You took the words out of my mouth. I always say take care and be well. So that was it. You signed off for us. All right.
Sorry about that.
No, it was perfect. All right. Take care and be well.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.